All right, you've been listening, everyone, to President Donald Trump speaking at the CENTCOM conference there at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida. He's vowing to make our military great again and to make our allies pay their fair share. He also stressed the need for strong borders, saying we want people to come to this country that can help our country, not people that want to hurt our country. Joining me right now with his reaction to all of it, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. Governor, good to see you. Your thoughts? I mean, he's playing a little bit to the home team there, right? Getting a very warm reception, and specifically on that line where he talked about the importance of border control, you heard a lot of applause.
I think he's very popular with the military. It's becoming very obvious that they are so happy to see a hands-on commander-in-chief who understands that the purpose of the military is to kill people and break things, not to be a social experiment, not to go and build schools and roads, but to be a fighting force, and that's what they're trained to do. But look, I think it's important that he went to MacDill Air Base today and to CENTCOM. This is a president who isn't just saying, come see me, a few generals. He's going out there and shaking hands and talking to the enlisted personnel. That's huge for morale. And I really believe it's a great way for him to start.
Governor, he said something that I think is very important. He quoted George Washington. He talked about the need of being prepared for war, how you got to be prepared. And the best way to prevent the actual war is to be prepared for it in the first place. What's he mean?
I think what he has done is taken the position that the best way to stay out of a war is to be so well prepared for one that nobody wants to take you on. People come at you when they think they can beat you, when they don't think that you're going to respond. They absolutely do not engage in a war when they know that you either have military superiority and, two, that you're willing to use it. I think the best description of James Mattis was this, that he is the last person on earth to want to get into a war. But if he goes into one, God help the poor sucker who drug him into it, because they absolutely will be on the losing end. And that's exactly how it's supposed to work, and I think Donald Trump understands that. I believe he surrounded himself with people who are committed to it, and I think we're a lot less likely to be engaged in war with a president like this than one that may have a dozen skirmishes going on around the world because every bully on the planet thinks that they can take a shot at the U.S. and we won't do anything.
Governor, do you feel safer now?
I do. You bet I do. I feel much safer. But it's not just because of some, macho approach. This isn't about that. This is about peace through strength, and it's also about saying what you mean and meaning what you say. We, for 8 years, had a president that would say things, but nobody believed that he really meant it. Red lines in Syria, keep your doctor, keep your health insurance. We've got a president who is mostly in trouble with the press and with the left because he's doing exactly
he's doing
what he
too
said
much.
he was going to
Yes,
do.
no, they're not used to all this action. I was just saying to someone, I was gone for the last 2 days, and the news cycle is so fast right now that, if you so much as blink for a minute, you might miss something because he's that proactive about taking things on. And I don't think people in Washington, and I don't think the press is really used to it at all. They're all being caught off guard. Let me ask you about this temporary suspension of people from 7 countries right now. We are waiting on filings from the Justice Department. They're going to be presenting their view before the Ninth Circuit Court. What do you think ultimately happens here? Will President Trump win this one?
Well, I have to believe that if it's a legal decision, he wins. If it's a political decision, he could lose. And the reason I say that is because every genuinely honest and objective constitutional scholar, people like Jonathan Turley, Alan Dershowitz, people who have openly said, I disagree with the president on his decision, but he's the president and he has every legal right to do what he's doing. That's really the question. This judge in Washington is not there to judge whether he likes what the president does. That's not his job. It is not the role of the judiciary to interpret or to like or dislike a policy. It's just to determine one thing. Is it constitutionally sound? And everyone who really understands the president's role and responsibilities in this have said he has the right to do it. Now, frankly, I agree with the policy, but even if I didn't, I'd have to join in with the others and say the judicial branch can't just legislate, nor can it become the de facto executive branch because it doesn't like something.
I hear you on that. When you say that you like the policy, I mean, this president is talking about building up our military so that hopefully we don't have to go to war. The threat of the United States of America is enough to get others to do what we need them to do. But when you look at the unconventional warfare that we are fighting right now, Governor Huckabee, with ISIS, it's not as though we can acquire more tanks and more planes and more guns and fight ISIS the traditional way. So here he is trying to get out in front of all this so that we have another means of keeping ourselves safe, but he's only going to be criticized for it.
Well, look, all of us as American citizens who do have constitutional protection, we get delayed all the time. Why? Because we had too many ounces of shampoo, or because we had surgery and have a pin in our knee. You know, here's what I don't understand. Why is it that some people are going utterly ballistic because people who have no constitutional right to come to the country are being delayed? And these challenges that the president has put in the way, they're not stop signs, they're speed bumps. Slows it down, doesn't keep people from coming, but it makes them answer some very important questions.
And gives us an opportunity.
Trish, we've got every right to ask those questions.
Gives us an opportunity to get our ducks in a row so that we're able to staff up. The FBI has 1,000 cases right now that are understaffed. So it gives us a chance to do what we need to do in terms of our own due diligence for who's coming in. Governor Huckabee, it is always good to see you. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Trish.
All right, we want to keep this conversation going about that temporary restriction on people coming in from those 7 countries known to sponsor terrorists. Joining me right now is Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Dr. Gorka, a pleasure. You just heard there from Donald Trump speaking to the military, talking about the need to beef up our military, to make it stronger, to give them more equipment, more personnel, give them more in the way of resources. When you look at the terror threat we are also facing right now, it's not a traditional threat, as I was just saying to Governor Huckabee. How do we confront that? Do we need to lock down the borders, such as he's suggesting, at least temporarily?
Well, thank you, Trish. I'm not Deputy National Security Advisor. I'm a Deputy Assistant to the President, just a small thing. But you nailed it in what you were talking about with the governor. This is unconventional warfare. This is irregular warfare. This isn't like Saving Private Ryan. There isn't some trench line or a large group of troops who are going to cross some kind of battlefield. You have to engage them. No, this is guerrilla warfare. This is terrorism. Look at the attacks in Nice. It wasn't a tank battalion. It was a guy in a stolen truck mowed down more than 80 people. Look at the attacks in Paris, the attacks in Istanbul. We need to stop those kinds of events occurring here, targeting Americans, and that's why this executive order was so very, very important, Trish.
Now, Dr. Gorka, people on the left say, hey, look, you know, no one from those 7 countries in question has actually committed a terrorist act here on U.S. soil. To which you say what?
To which I say, do we have to wait till people die to do something about it? Good counterterrorism is about prevention. It's not about trying to catch the horse after they've left the stable. This is predicated on a very simple moment in time. We are going to eradicate ISIS. The president has made that commitment. Eradicate. Not degrade, like President Obama said, but destroy. When we get more intense in our approach in the region with our partners, with our allies, what do we think is going to happen when we squeeze Mosul, when we go into Raqqa, when we destroy the headquarters of ISIS? As a Allied Nations expert said to me last week, they expect a starburst. There's going to be a bunch of jihadis coming out of that region, going west, going north, crossing the sea. We want to stop them coming here. We want to stop them.
You know, one of the problems, Dr. Gorka, and I see it over and over again, in every line of government work, is that the government is always reactionary. So, for example, you remember the shoe bomber, Richard Reed, who wanted to blow up a plane with his shoes. All of a sudden, you know, a few days later, we all have to take off our shoes. Well, why weren't they thinking proactively about something like that and maybe having us take off our shoes, including that guy who was trying to blow up a plane initially. I mean, there are many things that can be done to be proactive, but our government, and it's not just on the national security front, we see it over and over again when it comes to the SEC issues as well. The government is late to the party over and over again, and haven't we seen proof that people from these countries will take the opportunity to hurt other individuals? You have only to look at Europe.
Yeah, I mean, look, you look at the age we live in. Look at mass transit. Look at the speed of information flows. You cannot wait until the event occurs. You've got to get out in front of it. You've got to outthink the enemy. The army has a phrase called red teaming or red cell. You think like the enemy, what could they do next, and you stop them being able to do it. That's why this executive order was brought, to prevent the next potential atrocity in America. You've got to out-imagine the bad guys.
Let me quickly ask you about NATO. NATO, of course, hasn't really fallen through with its need to fund NATO, and we have been the primary source of funding. Is that about to change?
The president has been very clear here, and let's jettison the fake news about any potential problems within NATO from Washington. We just want to be, we want to see equitable burden sharing. The idea that you've got 30 nations, almost none of them are meeting their own agreement to spend 2% of their GDP on military, just 2%. Half a dozen of them have met it. That's not fair. Would you stay a member of a club and not complain if only a fraction of you paid the membership dues? That's untenable. So I expect the alliance to be strengthened with American leadership, because we're not going to lead from behind, but we want everybody to do their share, Trish.
Understood. Dr. Gorka, congratulations on your new position there at the White House. Good to see you.
Thank you.
All right, right now, there are less than 4 hours to go until the Trump Justice Department submits its arguments in defense of the temporary travel ban to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco. The White House says it fully expects the courts to restore the president's executive order stopping refugees and travelers from these 7 Muslim-majority nations that are known to be hotbeds for terrorism and have absolutely no ability to control who is in or out of their countries. The White House points to the Immigration and National Act. This is from 1952, saying it gives the president the power to do this. And I'm quoting right here from the law. Whenever the president finds that the entry of any aliens or any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he may, by proclamation and for such period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem to be appropriate. So there you go. Not to mention Article 2 of the Constitution. Vice President Pence has been quick to cite the executive power and the authority of the president. Here he is. Watch.
We don't appoint judges to our district courts to conduct foreign policy or to make decisions about our national security. Under statutory law and under the Constitution, that authority belongs to the President of the United States. We're going to move very quickly into the merits of this argument. And as the president said, we're going to win this argument.
This fight all comes after a ruling on Friday by a federal judge in Seattle putting a temporary hold on the ban nationwide. A ruling President Trump has called ridiculous. In fact, he tweeted out, "Just cannot believe a judge would put our country in such peril. If something happens, blame him and court system. People pouring in, bad!" exclamation point. And he also tweeted, "I have instructed Homeland Security to check people coming into the country very carefully. The courts are making their job very difficult." Well, the circuit court is likely to rule any day now. Many are predicting, no matter the outcome, this thing is heading straight to the Supreme Court. Joining me right now with a look at what is next, Hans van Spakovsky from the Heritage Foundation. Hans, good to have you here. First of all, do you think that President Trump is going to win this one?
Well, if the courts follow the law, he will win it. What you have really is a renegade federal judge in Washington. Contrast what he did with a federal court in Boston over the weekend who refused to issue an injunction precisely because of that provision that you cited that gives the president virtually unlimited discretion to suspend the entry of aliens.
You think Judge Robart is doing this for political purposes or perhaps purposes that are very much in sort of his intellectual sense of self and what he thinks is right or wrong, as opposed to just upholding the law?
Oh, I think that's exactly what's going on. Look, he obviously thinks from a public policy standpoint, he doesn't like this. That is no reason for a federal judge to stop it from happening. The only way he can stop it from happening is if what the president violated the law. But the law here, this isn't a gray area. It's black and white. The statute is crystal clear. And besides, look, there are Supreme Court decisions that say the zenith of the government's power is at the border.
So now it goes to the Ninth Circuit. They want to hear arguments from the White House. The White House is scrambling right now to continue putting all those together. They just have about 3 hours and change to go. What happens from there, Hans?
Well, unfortunately, the Ninth Circuit, you may know, is the most overturned appellate court in the United States. And that's because they also often don't follow the law. If they go the wrong way on this, then I'm sure an emergency appeal will go up to the U.S. Supreme Court. There we might get a 4-4 split because on immigration issues, we've seen before in other immigration cases that the 4 liberal justices also, unfortunately, use their public policy views to dictate what they do in the courts.
One of the reasons they're saying that this cannot stand is because it's discriminatory. Now, that's not actually what the judge in Washington, Judge Roper, got into. He actually said that this shouldn't stand based on economic reasons. But much of what we've heard and the concern amongst many members of the left is that this is somehow discriminatory. And they keep going back to a 1965 act that says, look, you cannot discriminate based on religion. The president would say, and the White House would say, this has nothing to do with religion. It has nothing to do with nationality per se, and thus is not prejudice in any way. It has everything, however, to do with security. Are they going to run into challenges as they try and make that argument? Where are the pitfalls there, if any?
That is a bogus argument being made by the challengers for this reason. Look, there are almost 50 countries in the world that are majority Muslim. All of the individuals from those countries can come here with the exception of these 7 countries. And the reason they were picked had nothing to do with their religion. It had everything to do with the fact that they are the largest sources of terrorists in the world. Many of them are failed and failing countries, which makes it very difficult to vet anyone coming in.
Yeah, and look, Obama's own administration kept saying over and over again that we can't possibly vet these refugees, and we have seen what has happened in Europe as a result of people traveling to places like Syria, one of those countries on the list. Anyway, a real, quite a constitutional crisis, if you would. The whole idea that this judge is forcing it all the way up to the Supreme Court. Rather amazing to watch. Hans, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here today.
California in many ways is out of control, as you know. Obviously, the voters agree. Otherwise, they wouldn't have voted for me.
So defunding is your weapon of choice.
Well, it's a weapon. I don't want to defund a state or a city. I don't want to defund anybody. I want to give them the money they need to properly operate as a city or a state. If they're going to have sanctuary cities, we may have to do that. Certainly, that would be a weapon.
President Trump vowing to withhold federal money from the state of California if California moves forward with its plan to be a sanctuary state. Sacramento, Los Angeles, San Francisco are already sanctuary cities. They show no signs of backing down, even in the face of Trump's threats. Watch.
Let me be clear. We will defend everybody, every man, woman, and child who's come here for a better life and has contributed to the well-being of our state.
I believe sanctuary city status. I think there are hundreds of mayors all over this country that are saying the same thing, and we stand united that a safer city is a city that doesn't allow its residents to live in fear.
Joining me right now is national syndicated radio host and former CIA analyst Buck Sexton. Good to have you here.
Thanks, Trish.
Wow, it's like we're living in some kind of alternative universe where, you know, the rule of law suddenly no longer matters, at least not in San Francisco or other places of California right now. How far do you think this is going to get? Because, you know, they need that money.
Well, the administration is not going to walk away from this fight, but neither are the cities in places like California or even at the state level, because the politics for them are all or nothing here. They view this as existential for the various administrations, talking about a city like San Francisco, Los Angeles. You have to be pro-sanctuary city to succeed there. And they don't care about the federal accountability because they're going to fight this out in the courts.
Because it's for their own individual health as a politician. In other words, you're saying they can't get elected unless they're for sanctuary cities. I mean, the idea that San Francisco, I mean, we can go back to the Kate Steinle example. It's so horrible and so sad. A guy who 5 times was deported from this country was there in San Francisco, and because one hand can't talk to the other because of the sanctuary city status, this guy is able to murder a young woman. I mean, it's tragic when you think about the sort of easy things that we could be doing to prevent crime, and we don't.
Well, the Steinle case highlights just how broken the system really is. We have an individual who's come back and forth 5 times, who's a convicted felon, and he's not even running afoul of deportation authorities in the state of California because they won't comply. All complying means, by the way, is that they'll actually hold somebody or tell federal authorities, depending on the circumstances, that there's somebody in their custody, this is now state and local, that the federal authorities have asked them to hold, and they actually will then go forth and allow the federal government to take control of this. They won't even do that. And the problem, though, with using the funding as a weapon is that it's imprecise and it's going to get fought out in the court. The funding is not a silver bullet here. It may work, but you're probably going to have to focus on law enforcement funding. You don't want to bring other aspects, supplemental nutritional assistance programs or housing programs, food programs. You're not going to want to bring that into this.
Well, why not? Let me just
reasons.
ask you. Well, okay, so but if the president says, look, we're not going to give any money to go to the federal housing project going forward because there's a good chance you get some people living in the federal housing project that are here illegally, and you're not telling us about it. What's wrong with that?
I just think the politics of it will become too toxic, and it's going to get fought out in the courts. It will look like you're focusing on a separate issue and that the federal government is compelling a state to do something it doesn't want to do, which even in the Obamacare decision, when they said you have to expand Medicaid funding or else, remember, Obamacare went in favor of the Obama administration, except for that one compulsion of the state's component.
But there are other things that I don't think you can touch, Buck, like, for example, federal funding for security to make sure that Los Angeles and San Francisco and Sacramento are safe.
This is the game of chicken that the mayors of Los Angeles and San Francisco and Chicago and, yes, New York City are going to play with the Trump administration. They're essentially going to say, look, we'll fight this out with you in court. The ACLU has already said they're going to be suing even small municipalities and districts across the country that may change their sanctuary city status. They've made it really clear that they're gearing up for an all-out battle here. And while I think the Trump administration is willing to fight it, it's not going to be quick and clean and easy. There are a lot of ways that they can slow this down. And ultimately, what you have is a state of lawlessness. In the case of California, a state that is actually embracing lawlessness and putting people in danger.
They want that lawlessness as well because they just don't want to give him an inch. Anyway, Buck, thank you so much. Good to have your perspective on this. Joining me right now, Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall and Ned Ryan, the CEO of American Majority. Good to see both you guys. I get it.
Thanks,
it's political, Ned. But this hysteria, I got to tell you, it's only been a couple weeks, but it's getting kind of old. At what point does the left just become a bunch of background noise?
Well, that's the thing. I think the Democrats and the media are overplaying their hands with this manufactured outrage and shock. I mean, here's the deal. People want to see Trump lead his new coalition. They want to see him be able to govern. And all the Democrats are offering right now is rage, not solutions. I mean, but again, it goes down this idea that I've been thinking about since the elections. They're quickly becoming a coastal regional party led by people like Nancy Pelosi, like Chuck Schumer, who are truly outside the mainstream. And so when you look at what they're doing and sometimes even leading some of these protests, Trish, the American people want jobs. They want paychecks. They want solutions. And you have Democrat leaders leading protests. And so you look at this, you look at what's taking place in the streets of Berkeley, you look at what took place in the streets of D.C., burning of cars, smashing of Starbucks. And I think to myself, with the Democrat leadership, with this protesting in the streets, I wonder what the second Trump term is going to look like.
Well, they do seem to be somewhat divorced from the hardships that are happening in everyday America right now, Leslie. And when you look at Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, they really embody that sort of let them eat cake kind of mentality that I think got the Democrats in trouble in the first place. So at what point do Democrats say, okay, enough? We need to become the party of action. We need to become the party of solutions as opposed to protests.
Well, first of all, I think Democrats should take a page from the Tea Party, quite frankly. The Tea Party started with protest. They got their numbers. They mobilized, and they flipped some seats, and they did not take over the Republican Party, but some would say they held it hostage, arguably, for a period of time, and got their party, they felt, back on track from where they felt it had been. You know what? Size matters if people show up to vote. We saw that with the election of our president, and I think we can see that in 2 years.
All right. I'm going to take your word at this, and I hear you. But I don't know, is Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are the answer there. Now, if you had told me, Bernie Sanders was going to get everybody worked up, I think you saw a bit of a movement there. And that's what you need, a movement that translates into something. But right now, Leslie, this just feels like it's just a whole bunch of noise.
Well, I don't agree it's a whole bunch of noise, because although we can get outrage fatigue, these are specific issues they're outraged about, whether it's a wall, whether it's a travel ban, which many on the left, myself, call a Muslim ban, or whether it's regarding the Affordable Care Act and women's rights. They're not out there about Dodd-Frank. Even the Affordable Care Act, and they're very concerned about where's the replacement, and certainly affected middle and lower income families. I don't see Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, ringing the bell and sounding the bugle.
I don't know. It kind of feels like every day, every minute, they're upset about something. They're also, by the way, I should point out real quick, guys, Democrats are so upset about Education Secretary Betsy DeVos getting a confirmed vote here that they are filibustering their Senate floor. They're for a full 24 hours. You're looking at none other than Elizabeth Warren speaking right now there on the floor, and she's doing this, of course, all to protest the president's pick. Kind of interesting. They're digging in their heels here about Betsy DeVos.
Well, they have to.
Of all people, they're the one that she is targeting. Ned, you say they have to. Why?
Well, they have to, because the teacher unions are some of their biggest political supporters, not only in regards to money, but ground game as well. So, of course, they have to fight this fight. And they're also going to fight the fight with Scott Pruitt at EPA, because, again, that's another hot-button issue for the left. But I want to go back to a couple things. First of all, the utter hypocrisy of the Democrats when they say, well, we're going to repeal Obamacare without a Democrat vote. Let's go back. How many Republicans voted for it again? Oh, that's right, 0. But I will say this, Leslie's right in regards to the Tea Party, although I will highlight the differences. When you had a Tea Party protest, they weren't destroying property and beating up people. But I will say this, what the Tea Party learned to do is say protests are great, but they fundamentally change nothing. We're going to go win political elections.
They did that, and they were successful at doing that. And that's a good point about the lack of destruction in their protests versus what we just saw in Berkeley.
And cleaning up after themselves.
Leslie and Ned, good to see you guys. Thank you so much.
Trish.
The Department of Justice has a little more than 3 hours to submit its response to a federal appeals court, explaining why the president's executive order on immigration and travel should be restored immediately. Coming up next, my intel on why our national security interests need to prevail and why this is heading to the Supreme Court. I'll see you right back here after this. All right, in just a short time, the Trump Department of Justice will be filing its briefs with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, justifying why the temporary suspension to travel in the United States from 7 known terror-sponsoring countries was put in place and must continue. What does it say about us when we're now at the point where our own president, whom the voters in this country elected, is seeing the very essence of his power challenged? What this all tells you is that those who lost the election are still really angry about it, and they're seizing this moment. They're relishing this moment. They're loving that a federal judge is essentially sticking it to the president of the United States. This judge in Seattle should be working to uphold the law. But I'm betting that rather than just uphold the law, he sees his platform as a way to influence society in the way that he wants, not his job. He claims there are adverse economic effects associated with a temporary travel ban, writing, the executive order adversely affects the state's residents in areas of employment, education, business, family relations, and freedom to travel. And a terrorist attack wouldn't? 9/11 didn't result in a hit to our economy? The judge says no one from these 7 countries has ever committed an attack on U.S. soil. So just because it hasn't happened, we shouldn't prevent it from happening in the future? And what about those attacks in Europe? Those attacks did originate from some of the countries in question. Security matters. The FBI says it's understaffed. There are an estimated 1,000 terrorism cases right now that need additional staffing. And our president is privy to intelligence that led him to make this decision, to invoke a temporary suspension on travel. The judge in Seattle, he doesn't have that intelligence. So, long story short, no federal judge should be able to substitute his or her personal judgment for that of the President of the United States on the issue of foreign policy and national security. Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution tells you that. Our president will win on this executive order, provided politics doesn't get in the way. That's today's intel. The president assuring worried Republicans that tax cuts are coming, and they're coming this year, considering how much he's gotten done in the past 2 weeks. Why would that be any surprise? I mean, can you believe it's only been 2 weeks actually since he's been in office? Lots going on. People hoping for a tax cut. Are they going to get it? That's next.
2017, can Americans expect a tax cut?
I think so, yes. And I think before the end of the year, I would like to say yes.
2017, can Americans expect a tax cut?
I think so, yes. And I think before the end of the year, I would like to say yes.
Okay. Can Americans in 2017 expect a new health care plan rolled out by the Trump administration this year?
Yeah, in the process, and maybe it'll take till sometime into next year, but we are certainly going to be in the process.
All right, that's President Donald Trump laying out his economic agenda to Bill O'Reilly. And it's welcome news to many who have been fretting that tax cuts might have to take a back seat given the flurry of activity the president has engaged in just in the last 2 weeks. Joining me right now with a look at what to expect, Americans for Tax Reform President Grover Norquist. Hey, Grover.
Hi,
all right, is it going to happen?
Yes, yes. And I think the president understated, which is an interesting new tactic. We have the House and the Senate have been working on tax reform for several years. Even during the Obama years, there were several moments when somebody thought maybe Obama was open to something reasonable. Turned out to be true. But that all that work was done. The Republicans
that's true,
in the House.
Right? There was certainly a lot of consensus, especially when it came to corporate taxes. I mean, we got the highest rate in the world. Why not knock that thing down in order to stir up economic activity in the U.S.?
Yeah. And when Trump ran, his big addition to the tax reform pot was to say, you know, everyone's been talking about taking the corporate rate from 35 to 25. Well, the European average is a little under 25, and we have about a 5% average state corporate income tax. So 25 doesn't do it. He said, let's take it to 15. And other people looked around, and the House Republicans said, well, we were at 25, and they moved to 20, which is a big thing in numbers of dollars. So the House Republicans started moving towards Trump's plan. Trump looked at the House Republican plan, said, I like how you handle the individual side. We'll do that. And then he looked at expensing, which all of the other Republican candidates had full business expensing, immediate business expensing, rather than long depreciation schedules. And he said, we should do that too. So Trump and the Republicans in the House and Senate have been moving together for 8 months or so.
So you see them in agreement on the corporate side. Tell me about individual taxes. You know, he told Bill O'Reilly, he thinks it's going to happen in 2017. What do you think the real timetable's like?
Well, the Republican in the House Republicans, Chairman Brady, Speaker Ryan, working with the White House, are going to have something out in 100 days. That will be the plan. It will be vetted. It will run all the numbers to make sure it is deficit neutral in the out years, which allows you to pass it inside reconciliation with 51 senators. So 100 days for that. And then either it gets done just before the August recess, or if the Senate's still juggling, shortly after the August recess.
Well, that would be good. I mean, a lot of people are hoping for that. They're counting on that. And the expectation is that it might start to stir up some more economic activity because people have more money in their pockets. And as you know, Grover, it's better to give the money to the actual people that are earning it in the first place so that they can be the ones to decide how to spend it. That said, I got to ask you, because, you know, members of the left and frankly, a lot of conservatives as well are saying, look, we can't spend like this. By enabling Americans to have this tax cut, it means that our tax revenue is going to be less, and therefore we're just going to keep running up the tab. To which you say, Grover?
Well, both President Trump in his campaign and as president and the Republicans in the House and Senate have made it very clear that they want to reduce the total cost of government spending. The critics or observers that you're quoting are quite right. While you bring taxes down, you also need to bring spending down as a percentage of the economy. They're looking to block grant Medicaid, which saves a great deal of money, would make sure that everybody who's getting Medicaid now as part of Obamacare's expansion would still get it. It would just be managed by 50 states. They wouldn't have all the strings that it now has. And as with welfare reform that Clinton signed, Trump could sign sending out Medicaid to 50 states. The competent governors welcome this and say they want it. The incompetent governors are afraid that it'll be clear that they don't know how to govern.
Well, Grover, we'll be looking forward to seeing all this happening maybe in 100 days. Grover Norquist, everyone. Thanks so much. The Trump Department of Justice is set to file their briefs with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals very soon. They are trying to justify why the temporary suspension of travel to the United States from these 7 countries that are lawless and sponsor terror organizations, why that temporary ban is justified. That's going to be happening any minute from now. And I want to hear from you. What do you think? Should the appeals court uphold the president's executive order? Head over to my Facebook show page at Trish Intel. Tell me what you think. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Trish_Regan and the show at Trish Intel.